So talking about evolution and things of that nature, and Europe 10,000 years ago, I did some research on the family tree. I think it's something people go through every so often, where you're at a certain age. Sometimes when you're young, you're fascinated. You might not know beyond your grandparents, family members. I know people are living longer now, so maybe it's more common that you might know your great-grandparents. I'm not sure about that though. Is that even possible? For, I suppose 15, 20, 18, 18, whatever that is, 30, 54. In theory, if every generation was born at 18, the parent was 18, then 54 would be your great-grandparents, is that right? 18 is your parent, 36 is your great-parent. Yeah, well, I think that'd be a bit silly, but, it's possible, isn't it? To know your great-grandparents. And by that same token, your great-great-grandparents. If everybody did the old having a baby at 18 thing, just as a thing. I think the average generation gap though is 30 years. My kids are 30 years roughly younger than me, and I'm roughly 30 years younger than my parents. Seems like a nice sweet spot, I think. But there are variations. I know some people are leaving it later now, which is fine, and some people have them younger as well, which is fine as well. So I decided to look into the family tree. Just drinking coffee. And there's a few websites, and there's two main ones that I've used because they were, I'm from the UK, so they were UK sort of specific, and that would be ancestry.co.uk and findmypast.co.uk. I started off with findmypast.co.uk. I think originally they had the best sort of databases of information. Obviously they had all the information from births, deaths and marriages, and they had all other stuff as well, census information that had been released, and it was all handy to search and look up. They also had war records and things like that, so they had newspaper archives and a lot of other stuff as well, and it was very good. And it's very hard researching your family tree. I found there's always a tendency to assume and fill in gaps. And the rule is that, and it's a pretty hard, fast rule that you should use, is always work back. Never find someone and try and work forward. I think that's quite key. So obviously, you go from your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and I knew very little about even my grandparents actually, and the great-grandparents. And nothing at all, I think, really. So it was quite interesting. I didn't know when they were born, their birth, and I had a rough idea. And that's a nice thing about these search engines, because you can search. And I found them all, of course, and it was all good. And I steadily went back, and every so often, the hardest thing was women losing their surname at marriage. And if you didn't know it, that was quite hard now, because I don't think it used to be registered in the marriage register even, so it'd be missing unless you ordered the marriage cert, which you could do, but quite expensive. And if you wasn't sure it was them on the marriage front, then that could have been sort of quite difficult. But it was very interesting, and I did actually see. I think it was I'm trying to remember now. I think it was my great-grandfather on my mother's side. I found him in a phone book. There was a copy of a very early phone book from sort of the first part of the 20th century, and it was in there, and I remember it was 3 or 4 digits long, the number. It wasn't a very long number anyway, so there wasn't many telephones at that time, and that was very good now to research. So yeah, I did all that, and that was mainly on findmypast.co.uk, but I heard a little thing that you can now do some form of DNA test, and that would allow you to see a bit more information about your past, maybe in the last few hundred years, 1,000 years, whatever. I was intrigued by that. I wanted to see where did I originally sort of come from. Well, certainly in the last 10,000 years. So essentially, they send you out a little kit, ancestry.co.uk on their DNA side. It's about €100, £80 sterling. I think it's about $100. They send you this little kit out. You essentially spit in a little vial, as it were, a little container. You put a preservative in, give it a good shake, seal it, give it a good shake, and send it back to them. And they say when they've received it, and it takes a good while. I think it's nearly 2 months, maybe 5 or 6 weeks for them to analyse it. And then the results come up on the website. And they have refined the results since. I originally took the test, which is now probably a couple of years ago. And it's fascinating. So according to my DNA, I'm 35%. I've got to think about this now. I'm about 35% Irish. I think about 55% British. And about 10% Norwegian. I'm not quite sure where the Norwegian comes from, but it's quite a long time ago, so there is a chance it was Vikings, I think. Somebody I worked with, I was showing them the result of the test, and I think they said, that's the Vikings, when they came to what is now Britain, So it's quite interesting. What was even more fascinating, as they've refined the results, they even showed in the UK, in part of Britain, where my family would have lived. Obviously, going back 200 years ago, people didn't move around a lot. They stayed in the locality, with some migrations going on over time. Obviously, being British, we're really French, I think. There's sort of northern France, Brittany. And then I suppose if you go back further, you end up, I think, going towards Turkey and Africa and all this sort of stuff. But it didn't go quite that far back. Well, far back enough, and it was incredibly interesting. And it's interesting that on both sides of my parents' family, there is Irish connections, which I find quite interesting. Certainly on my mother's side, there was no indication from the names that there was any Irish connections, but there is. So that was interesting. And I was able to track down. So once they've got your DNA, one thing they can do on Ancestry, and you can opt in or out. They can make it sort of public, your family tree, or some of it, and they can also make your DNA. They can look for matches, see if you're related to anyone. And of course, there's people, especially in the US, very active, very active at researching and DNA and stuff and all the rest of it. And it turns out that you sort of relate to thousands of people, but it's very, very distant. Because if you imagine you're like, I suppose I'm trying to imagine the analogy, it's like an upturned pyramid. So you're the upside down pyramid, you're the point, and then it just fans out, your ancestors. So, so there was a few Americans, but they were very, very distant. I mean, there was nowhere on the tree where they would fit in for me. And there's a few branches of the tree goes off on a tangent for me. So, and I didn't follow them because when you've got lots of children, lots of marriages, it just was going on and on and on for some, and it was interesting. But ultimately, I found it quite a sad thing, discovering lots of children you never knew about in the family who had never reached adulthood because of the high rate of child mortality.